Good evening. Let's call this meeting to order, the Champaign County Board. It's Thursday, October 18th, 2018. The time is 6:30. Roll call, please.
Petrie,
Present.
Quisenberry, Rector, Rosales.
Here.
Storr, Summers, Tinsley,
Present.
Batraspati, Anderson, Clemens, Clifford, Coert, Douglas,
Here.
Eisenman,
Here.
Esri,
Here.
Furtado, Goss,
Here.
Harper,
Here.
McGuire, Mitchell, Patterson,
Here.
Weibel.
Present. Mrs. Torres entered the room also. Prayer. Normally, I save this prayer for next month for Thanksgiving because it's November, but the November meeting is after Thanksgiving, so I'm going to say the Thanksgiving prayer this month. We're going to get a head start. Now we come together, we are glad to see each other. All the good things that we share come to us with love and care. Earth, we thank you for our food, for work and play, and all that's good, for wind and rain and sun above, but most of all for those we love. Amen. Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would the clerk please read the notice of the meeting?
Notice is hereby given that a regular meeting of the County Board, Champaign County, Illinois, will convene on October 18th, 2018, at 6:30 p.m. in the Lyle Shields Meeting Room, Brookins Administrative Center, 1776 East Washington Street, Urbana, Illinois, in said county for the purpose of allowing and ordering payments of claims against the county, receiving and acting upon reports of committees, and such other matters as may be brought before said meeting, which said meeting shall continue in session from day to day until the completion of said business.
Thank you. Seek approval of the agenda and the addenda. Moved by Rosales, second by Ms. Petrie. Discussion. See none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Date and times of our next regular meetings. The County Facilities Committee meeting is not in its usual slot. It is on Wednesday, November 6th. It usually meets on Tuesday, but that's election day, so we moved to the day after that. Same time in this room. ELOC on Thursday, November 8th. Highway and Transportation on Friday, November 9th at 9 a.m. in the County Highway Building Conference Room. And of course, on November 13th, we'll have the Committee of the Whole for Justice, Social Services, Policy, Personnel, and Appointments, and Finance at 6:30. And again, our next regular county board meeting is on Tuesday, not Thursday, Tuesday, November 27th, after Thanksgiving at 6:30 in this room. Okay, public participation. We have 4 people signed up, 5 minutes each. First person is Shaden Widner.
Good evening. My name is Sean Widener, Village of Mahomet, Mayor. I'm not here tonight to speak for or against the solar farm resolutions being considered. I respect each community's decision whether to support or not support them. I also support and respect the county's role in overseeing rural lands outside of urban areas. That being said, I felt compelled to come tonight for 2 reasons. First reason, to support our neighbor, the Village of St. Joseph, which the mayor could not attend tonight as she's at a zoning meeting for additional solar farm applications. Hard to be in 2 places at once. So the second and probably more important issue that I wanted to just briefly cover tonight really pertains to all communities within the county, and it's our rights within the mile-and-a-half ETJ. And as I understand it now, solar farms can be located within a half a mile of our communities without any local consideration. And again, I apologize for maybe not catching this sooner, but I'm here now. That being said, I would respectfully request the board reevaluate the current ordinance and correct any oversights in this mile-and-a-half rights. So I thank you for your time and thank you for your service.
Next is Christopher Soppet.
Thank you. My name is Christopher Soppet. My wife and I are owners of the parcel that the solar farm in the one case is intending to be developed on. Just real brief, I know I've spoken in front of several of you, but not in front of the entire board. So I'll be brief with my comments, but there's a few things I'd just like to say. One, this project would be beneficial for both the landowners and the developers. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. But I also wanted to point out that this is good for the environment. We are putting alternative energy, renewable energy, back into the grid. It's also good for the environment in the sense that it is a positive impact on drainage. The perennial ground cover that will be on the 15, 16 acres that this project occupies would be a positive in terms of helping to slow down the amount of water that goes through the drainage tile. This is also good for the neighboring community. This is a project that will generate tax revenue. I think it was estimated to be about $250,000 over the first 20 years in today's dollars, not adjusting for inflation. Much of this going to the local schools, which our children are part of. So we like to see that. And also the energy is discounted and given first dibs to the local communities, which Mr. Borkowski explained at previous meetings, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer any questions about how that works if you want to know. And I just briefly said that this is good for both landowner and developer. So, I mean, they're paying us more than what we can make by farming it, and they're farming it for us, really. I mean, what we're doing with growing crops is we're farming the sun. We're taking the sun's energy and turning it into something that provides fuel, either in the form of ethanol or for animal feed. And they're turning it into just a different form of energy, and they're doing a better job of it than we can do. Just, you know, from the fact that they're paying us more than what we can earn from the grain markets right now. So I just wanted to briefly point those things out, and I wanted to be available for any questions that you might have, and feel free to ask.
Thank you. There's no questions during public participation. We can ask you questions during the discussion. Next up is Roma Chenoweth.
My name is Roma Chenoweth. I am the owner of 3 farms, including one sesquicentennial farm and a centennial farm located in St. Joe Drainage District number 3. I've been involved in farming for 20 years, both on a crop share and cash rent basis. I've also personally handled tile installation, drainage issues, and fiber optic challenges on my farms. When I learned of an opening on the Drainage Commission, I indicated my interest to the County Board office, which subsequently mailed me an application and scheduled an interview. I completed the application with the first question being, do you own land within the drainage district? Upon completion of the application, I prepared for the interview. I obtained and reviewed various documents, including Illinois Drainage Law by Donald Euchman, a Citizen's Guide to Illinois Agricultural Drainage Practices and Laws, published by Prairie Rivers Network, over 100 pages in all, as well as historical background published by Champaign County Land Resource Management Plans, along with the Illinois statutes, and a variety of articles online. At the conclusion of the interview of approximately 10 minutes, the County Board Chairman emphasized to me that he alone made the selection and that his decision was final. I subsequently learned that the other applicant, a man, had been selected to be the St. Joe District 3 Commissioner. The Illinois statutes state in Section 4.3, qualifications of commissioners, neither shall any person be appointed or elected commissioner of a district who does not own land in the district unless A, the court in election districts or the appointing authority in other districts finds it to be in the best interests of the district that the requirement of ownership of land in the district be waived, or B, the selecting of commissioners is by appointment and a majority of the adult landowners owning a majority of the area embraced in the district have duly petitioned the appropriate appointing authority to allow the appointment as commissioner of an individual who does not own land in the district. The chairman's selection for the commission does not own farm ground in St. Joe Drainage District number 3. I further asked the newly appointed commissioner if he was asked to give a number of dates in the interview, as I was. He indicated he was not asked to give any dates. He also told me the 2 other St. Joe number 3 commissioners had urged him to run for the 3rd position. Finally, the Champaign County Board lists their strategic plan as one that values diversity and strives for a workforce reflective of our community. Of the 105 appointed drainage commissioners in Champaign County, 4 are women. I fully accept the County Board's chairman's decision as final. However, I respectfully request that in the future, more oversight be followed so that the land ownership requirement as written in the Illinois statutes be implemented. I also request that in the future, identical questions be posed to all applicants in order to make a fair and impartial decision. And finally, I would hope that more women would be encouraged to apply for these commissions. And to further this goal, men who do not own farmland in the district should not be given precedence over women who do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Michael Burkowski.
Hi, my name is Mike Borkowski. I am the developer working with the Soffits on both community solar farms that are being presented tonight. I'm here to make myself available for any questions that you may have. There's a very high level and brief summary of the reasons that I believe that this project was approved at both levels. I'd like to highlight the following. I know that the ordinances took an inordinate amount of time to gain approval here. One of those reasons was around noise, and I think some of the complaints that were presented as a result of some of the wind farms that had gone in over time. And we spent an extensive amount of time discussing that during our earlier meetings, where we were able to show very detailed mathematical calculations as to why at the borderline of the fence of these solar farms, you will not be able to hear anything. There's no moving parts. There's no big thing swinging in the air. There's only inverters similar to the ones that people have on their house for the solar on their house. And there's just more of them because it's a little bit bigger. But there is not that noise concern, and I think we alleviated many of those thoughts in our earlier meetings. Also wanted to highlight, just like Mr. Soffit did, that there is a fair bit of taxes that come along with this, and the actual financial benefits will be passed back to the individuals through discounted power. We received no objections for the Champaign solar farm in either of our meetings. For the first, both in the zoning and the zoning board of appeals. For the Soffit farm, we didn't receive any formal necessarily objections. St. Joe, as was mentioned earlier, wanted their rights expressed that they should have a say in matters. We worked extensively with them with regards to ensuring that the gun club and the fishing club that's right there are preserved. We designed our facility around that area to ensure the longevity of that club right there. And that was what was really important to them. And, because of that, this land really can't be used for anything else. If it were, that gun club would cease to exist. And so the two are really symbiotic and relying on each other. And those are the big items. So if you have any questions, I'll be available during that period. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other further public participation? Okay, we'll close that. Thank you, Mr. Goss. Next up is the consent agenda. Is there any item which board members wish to pull off the agenda? I want to point out that one resolution has been updated. It's in the yellow. The rewording in the resolution did not properly reflect the motion, so we updated that. Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Mr. Esri. Second by Mr. Patterson. Roll call, please.
Petrie,
Yes.
Rector. Yes. Rosales.
Yes.
Storr. Yes. Summers. Yes. Tinsley.
Yes.
Vachusbody.
Yes.
Anderson. Yes. Clemens.
Yes.
Clifford. Yes. Coert.
Yes.
Douglas.
Yes.
Eisenman.
Yes.
Esri.
Yes.
Furtado. Goss.
Yes.
Harper.
Yes.
McGuire.
Yes.
Mitchell. Yes. Patterson.
Yes.
Weibel.
Yes, motion carries. Next up, communications from board members. Ms. Petrie.
You'll notice at your desk a postcard book that I have been able to share with all of you courtesy of the Illinois Heritage Association. Bud Baker and Pat Miller are the two people who put this together, and they asked me to share it with my fellow county board members and elected county officials. Pat Miller was the director of the Champaign County Historic Museum when I was chair of the Preservation Committee at the museum. And Bud Baker, for those of you who have lived here a long time, owned Austin Tennis. And both of these individuals over the years were very much involved in the history of Champaign County. And both of them, myself and two others, are the ones who established the Preservation and Conservation Association of Champaign County, which now has a history of being active for the past 30 years and ongoing. So Bud is no longer alive, but Pat is, and she hopes that you will enjoy the history there as you thumb through these postcards. They're really quite wonderful to look at. Thank you.
Any other communications? Okay, let's move on to approval of the minutes. Seek approval of the minutes of September 20th, 2018. Moved by Petrie, second by Furtado. Discussion. See none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We have no action from the county facilities. We have some items from ELUC. Mr. Esri.
Thank you. I move adoption of resolution number 2018-355, granting a special use permit, zoning case 894-S-17, St. Joseph Solar One Community Photovoltaic Solar Farm.
Second by Mr. Patterson. I want to point out this is the one next to the gun club. Mr. Esri.
Yes, thank you. As it's said, St. Joe does have issue with it being as close to their, it's actually it's well within the mile and a half, and it's well within even the half mile that the ordinance calls for. It does appear to me personally that it is a decent site for a solar farm if there's going to be one in that area. Now, there are two other solar farms that are proposed in that general area, so that kind of tells me that it must be a decent area for solar farms, or otherwise there wouldn't be two others in that same general area. That's not to say that gives this one necessarily any more credence than the others. But it makes sense to me that if we're going to do anything with solar farms in this county, I think this one probably needs to get passed. I understand St. Joe not wanting it necessarily right on their back doorstep, but this one, I tend to agree with Mr. Borkowski that the location there with this particular property, it's probably not that bad of a location. It's all in all, I guess I'm still not necessarily a great big fan of solar farms just from the standpoint of I farm, so to me that should remain farm ground. But yet I also have to look at it from the standpoint of property rights as well. And I believe that that in my personal opinion plays a big part. And we aren't asking also another thing with the solar farm being so close to St. Joe, we aren't asking for something like a hog farm or a garbage dump or something like that. We aren't even asking for something like controversial. This just popped in my head earlier when I was thinking about like a strip club or something like that. I mean, it's a solar farm. Yes, it's going to be there for years, but it is controversial, but it's not something that it's for being a neighbor. There could be a lot. My point is there could be a lot worse things to put there for the neighborhood or for even somebody to live right across from. No, I'm making a point that there's a lot worse things that could be proposed there. Now, whether or not some of those things would even make it to this point, I kind of doubt it, but people could propose something that's a lot worse. Yes, it does take the ground out of production for a long time. So if it gets built, we'll be looking at it for at least probably 25 years. One comment that I know Mr. Borkowski said, this whole process with the state, it goes into a lottery. And going into the lottery is part of the reason we don't have everything like the decommissioning site and cost estimate. That's not been provided like the ordinance requests. The big reason for that is because of the lottery, and at least the way I understand it, and the nature of the lottery is they put their name in, and Mr. Borkowski stated at ELUC that it's basically a 1 in 10 chance that they'll even get selected to have this solar farm built at the state level. So they don't necessarily want to put in the upfront cost to have the decommissioning costs figured out by a professional when they don't even know if it's going to get approved by the state. It's a 1 in 10 chance. So, and to get that lottery to basically have a complete application for the lottery, they have to have their special use permit in hand. So if they don't have the special use permit, they might as well not even enter the lottery, is my understanding. So in my mind, again, it comes down to, yes, I understand St. Joe doesn't want it right there. The next two solar farms that will be, unless ZBA, of course, ZBA can turn them down and ELUC can turn them down. But if they make it as far as the full county board, they're even closer yet to St. Joe, and probably not in as good a location as this proposed one is for an actual solar farm. And just in my mind, I believe that this one needs to advance. Thank you.
Further discussion, Ms. Petrie.
Well, I think it's important to share some information that I learned when I attended the Illinois State Planning Conference, and then with several other conversations that I've had about solar farms. And it's not information that was available when the ZBA was going through all the hearings for the ordinance, and now the beginning of the hearings for each of the various farms. And I'm just sharing this as information. This isn't should you vote for it or not. This is purely informational. Aaron alluded to the lottery. The lottery was something that none of us knew about, and roughly right now, there are about 750 applications under ComEd, and there are about 750 under Ameren. And actually, I've learned since I was at the state conference that there will be more than 1,500 by the end of the year that are going into the lottery. So it may be even less than 1 in 10 by the time that happens. And what will happen with the lottery, in theory, we don't know how it will play out, but in theory, what will happen with the lottery is that they want to distribute these throughout the area. So they will be aggregated geographically, and then within those aggregations, they will pull the ones that get pulled out for the lottery. And when Mr. Borowski was before ELUC, he was very helpful in answering some of my questions that came out of attending the state conference. I asked him, okay, so yours aren't chosen out of the lottery because you don't know if you'll be chosen or not. Will you go ahead and build them? And he explained that the margin of profit is very low. You told me 13%, if I'm remembering correctly. So without the incentive from the state, it makes it very difficult for any of these projects to go ahead without that money coming to the developer. So when we have these conversations about these farms, it's not a priori that they are going to happen. It will depend on the play out from the lottery. I have since learned that actually there's going to be a roll down from this first round to a second round and everybody seems to be very convinced that the state will fund a second round, and those that were not chosen in this lottery will go into the second round, and more can apply at that time, and then there'll be another one. There'll be A, B, and C. So just because some are not chosen in our county this time, there will be other chances, but that will delay when that will happen because it'll be a year before there is another lottery. I also had a conversation with Jennifer Martin at ISTC, the Illinois Sustainability Technology Center, and she is working with others around the state and around the country. They're already working on how do you recycle these solar panels. We're only just talking about getting our first one started here. Well, we have the one out at the university, but not a big plethora of them. And they're already talking about how can they recycle the panels and how can they reclaim as much material out of the panels as possible. And the last comment, and I've said this before, everybody is talking about the taxes that are going to go into the various communities or townships from these panels. And just to remind everybody, when the wind farms came in, everybody said, wow, look at all the money that's going to come in, especially the schools, because that money was coming in on top of the funding for the schools. And then the state leveled off what the property value could be for every wind turbine. Well, they've already done that with the panels. They started out that way. But then the state came in and swept the money off of the wind turbines. So it was not the education funding, and on top of that, the money that came from the wind turbines. And the state will do that again. The state is in such a bad budgetary time that you can be guaranteed that the state will come in and do that. That doesn't mean that we don't want these. It's just that we can't say, oh, good, look at all the extra money, and these calculations of how much more money will be coming in probably will not be playing out in another several years. Thank you.
Further discussion. Mr. Rector.
Can we have Mr. Hall come to the desk? We can ask a few questions.
Sure. Wait, Mr. who?
Hall?
Oh, John Hall. I'm sorry. I thought you said Mr. Alt.
I
Alt,
apologize if I
Alt,
didn't
Alt.
enunciate.
Mr. Hall.
Thank you, sir. I know you and staff and ELUC, everybody's worked really hard on this, and it's come to our attention now in the last week or so with some discussions I've had with mayors. I'm kind of curious how everybody seemed to think it was going to be the half mile on the ordinance, or the mile and a half, and then the ordinance was written for a half mile instead of the mile and a half. So I'm trying to look at that history just to grasp how that happened. Thank
Well,
you.
I'm glad you asked that question because disputes over the mile and a half are why we have zoning in Champaign County in the first place. The county board adopted zoning to have some control over land use in that mile and a half. I believe that originally some folks believed that surely the solar farms would be going in under the same kind of rules as wind farms. We've never said that, but I know that a lot of people had that impression. State law preempts county approval of wind farms within a mile and a half. I don't know why, but they did. They stepped in and did that in the beginning. They have not done that for solar farms. Throughout the course of the text amendment, we started off with no limits on within the mile and a half. We thought we would surely get some comments to guide us on what people wanted. Finally, once the folks from Sydney made their unhappiness known, we added several different separations, but we never once proposed to keep solar farms completely out of the mile and a half. That's because as your staff member on behalf of zoning, I'm going to always argue for your voice on zoning issues within that mile and a half. I don't believe that's an oversight. I believe that's a way to corroborate with to collaborate with municipalities. They can provide comments during the public hearings. The county board can consider those comments. St. Joe has been very active. They had comments. They have provided comments on all 3 solar farms proposed in their ETJ. Mayor White from the village of Sydney has been to almost every public hearing we've had. And again, they would like to see that mile and a half honored. Well, I think that's the wrong way to word it. There was never a mile and a half prohibition for solar farms. There was for wind farms. So that's the background to it. In this case, the other thing about these separations, we draft those sort of generically. It would be good if we could tailor every requirement to every known condition. Obviously, that's not possible. So even though the ordinance has a half-mile separation, my expectation, the expectation of several zoning board members, is that that may well be varied in any instance depending on the circumstances. Personally, I agree with Mr. Borkowski that the property within the St. Joe ETJ that's here before you tonight, it's right next to the St. Joe Sportsman's Club. It's also right next to a substation. I think it's a great location for a solar farm. It is very close to the village because the village is on the other side of the interstate. My expectation is that the village will not simply jump over the interstate, but probably start 2.5 miles to the west at the existing interchange. And so when you look at it that way, is it really just less than 500 feet from the village boundary? Yes, but it's like 2.5 miles away from where we would expect development to be when and if the village is ever successful at jumping the interstate. That's where there's already some development located. So, you know, it's a complicated issue. You can never identify all this stuff ahead of time, and that's why it depends on your judgment in every given case. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that helps. Again, it's just, the people I've talked to, somehow they all had it in their mind that it was going to be 1.5 miles, and they admit they should have caught it, and then here we are now, and it's obviously an issue. So I'm not sure where we'll go from here. Thank you.
Well, I would just say, unless you're prepared to say to all those landowners within 1.5 miles of a municipality, sorry, we're not going to consider a solar farm there, then you're going to have a situation like this. But if you're at the point where you think the county board should consider something like that, you know, give us the direction through ELUC, and we'd be happy to draft something up.
Great. Thank you.
Further discussion. Mr. McGuire.
Okay. Because I think the situation here is, there are private property rights for the landowner, obviously that we have here, and then we have property rights for the people that live in the cities, and we have to balance between the two of them. And I think the city's concern are, like in St. Joe's case, or in Muhammad's case, that they want to have some rights and some discussion before the solar panels get within 1.5 miles, because those people that live there and the people that live in the homes around there don't want their properties devalued because there's a solar panel put within 200 feet of their property without some discussion, or 1/2 mile. My question is, generally in the zoning, like in Champaign-Urbana's case, isn't it normal for something within 1.5 miles to have some, some rules about what happens within the cities? Because I thought I've seen in the past, you bring up wind farms as an example, but there are other cases where anything within 1.5 miles would there be anything near Champaign-Urbana would have some rules about,
Well, the 1.5 mile area is where we do have overlapping planning jurisdiction and overlapping subdivision jurisdiction, but there is not overlapping zoning jurisdiction. There are certain zoning protest rights that the state has granted to municipalities, but in terms of, we've always asked for comments on special use permits within 1.5 miles. Sometimes we get comments, sometimes not. And again, in the example of wind farms, the state preempted and said you can't do wind farms within 1.5 miles. That's up to the municipality. That sort of makes sense. I believe the concerns of a solar farm are not quite the same as for a wind farm. As regards property value impacts, we should be concerned about property value impacts for those landowners in the rural area as much as for landowners in the municipal area. And the zoning board spent a lot of time trying to analyze property value impacts. They finally decided there was really no good information. They weren't trusting the information that was available because they couldn't find anything similar to some of the large solar farms that have already been proposed here in Champaign County. But that's why they established these separations, 240 feet to properties that are 10 acres or less, and 255 feet from any principal building on properties that were more than 10 acres in area. And then those separations only apply when a property is bordered on 2 sides. If a property is bordered on more sides, the ordinance says greater separations may be needed. So the zoning board crafted this amendment trying to make sure that the separations and the screening required and the noise standards would be enough to minimize any property value impacts. Now, it's a difficult thing to analyze, and we can't say there won't be any, but in the judgment of the zoning board, the amendment that you adopted should have no property value impacts.
Continue. But I think that's a question of the cities when they lose 1.5 miles, because in St. Joe's case, they've got the interstate on the north side and the river on the south side, which limits the space that they can grow to the east or west. And that's why they want to be part of the discussion at 1.5 miles. And that's my concern, I think other people's concern, when you don't allow them to be part of the discussion at the 1.5 miles. And I want to see it put back in the ordinance, personally. So if that's what it takes to move it back, then that's what I'd like to see happen.
And I will just point out that the area in St. Joe's comp plan, the area where this solar farm is proposed, is indicated as remaining agriculture. So it's not in an area where they're anticipating development. In their old comp plan, they had indicated industrial development there. But in their new comp plan, they didn't even indicate that. They just indicated it will remain agriculture.
Actually, I don't have a problem with this solar panel because of the sportsman's club that's there, I don't see growth as an issue. But I don't know that our zoning should determine the growth for St. Joe or Mahomet. I think that should be left up to them, and we shouldn't be deciding in the next 40 years how they're going to grow.
Mr. Isri.
Thank you. I guess my take on the mile and a half, St. Joe hasn't lost that. None of the villages have. They didn't necessarily have it entirely to begin with. That's why it's an overlapping area. I guess if we as a county, I don't know if this would even be possible, like under state statutes and stuff, but if we wanted to just totally cede that mile and a half to any and all incorporated areas of the county, I guess maybe we could do that. But that's doing a big disservice to the people, as John Hall's alluded to, that live and own property within that mile and a half, because then who do they go to for their government purposes when it comes to their land? If they aren't annexed into the village, they could go to the village of St. Joe and talk. Well, okay, this village can listen to them, but to a large degree, they could basically be talking to a brick wall because they aren't part of the village. But if we've ceded those zoning and from the county to those villages, then they can't come to the county to talk to us. So St. Joe hasn't lost their mile and a half. Mahomet's not going to lose their mile and a half. Sydney hasn't lost their mile and a half. This is a special use permit, which, John, you can correct me, but the way the state statutes are set up, there's not a formal protest mechanism, you could say. That's my wording. Now, in certain other zoning cases, there are protests, and those require then more than just a simple majority of this board if there is a protest to override. But the way the state statutes and everything are written, this just requires a simple majority. It's left up ultimately to us, the county board, to make this decision. The idea that there hasn't been plenty of time, there were countless ZBA meetings writing the ordinance. There have been 2 on this one particular, or just the one ZBA? Two ZBA meetings on this particular, actually both of, that's right, there are 2, when I think about it now. On both of these solar farm ordinances before us tonight, there's been 2 ZBA meetings. There was an ELEC meeting 2 weeks ago. The only people who showed up to comment were the landowners, the Soffits, and Mr. Borkowski. There was no one there from any of the villages. No one else spoke during public comment. I don't believe there were anybody else in the audience even, other than Jamie, is that right? But there was very few people there. So the idea that they haven't had time to have their input kind of is thrown out the window, if you ask me. There's been plenty of time for input. But again, it comes down to the fact that unless we're going to, and I don't know that we can, and I don't want to cede that mile and a half to the villages, because again, who do the people go to? It's ultimately our decision. Vote it up or down. That is your choice as an individual board member, as representing your constituents. But it is ultimately our decision. That's the way it's set up. It could be, we could go to that mile and a half, but that's not to say that this particular solar farm still wouldn't have been proposed for this area and asked for this exact same waiver. Does that mean that because all of a sudden, instead of it being, we had it in the ordinance at a half mile, we have it at a half mile now, but let's say it originally was written at a mile and a half. So under the ordinance, it was written under a mile and a half, but this same proposal comes in asking for 465 feet. Does that make it any less viable? Because instead of the half mile, we wanted it out even farther? I don't think it does. They're asking for a waiver. Waivers can be asked for a lot of things, and we're likely going to get waivers asked for on most any of these solar farms. One of the waivers that I believe has been granted in this was there's a lane requirement in the ordinance talking about, I forget the exact width, but they wanted a narrower lane to have access to their inverters. Well, a narrower lane means that ultimately they're going to take up less overall space. What's wrong with that? If they think they can get by with, I don't remember, let's say it was a 35-foot lane, and originally the ordinance called for about a 50-foot lane. I don't remember if those are the exact numbers. If they think they can get by with a 35-foot lane, are we going to say, oh, nope, you have to stick to that 50-foot lane? So we're getting hung up on the idea that the cities, villages, an ordinance can ultimately tell us what to do. They need to be listened to, yes. They need to be respected, yes. We need to work with them, yes. But ultimately, it is our decision. Thank you.
Mr. Hall, you want to make another comment?
I do. I think it's something I should let you all know about. We don't bring the last special use permit we brought to the county board was the wind farm, and it sailed through. We were reading last week, Susan Bergstrom, our senior planner, and we were reading in the statutes, and I was boning up on this thing coming to the county board. And the statutes actually have a unique requirement for special use permits. And in the statute actually states, if the county board does not accept the recommendation of the zoning board of appeals, they shall remand it. Now, that's different than what the statutes say about variances, where the statutes say the county board can override the zoning board recommendation with a 2/3 vote. And in map amendments, the statutes actually don't say what the relationship should be between the ZBA recommendation and what the county board does. Here in Champaign County, there has always been a strong tendency to treat it like a special use permit. If the county board wants something different than what the zoning board recommends, they have always remanded so that there will be a public hearing record that supports the decision of the county board. And so the statutes don't give us detailed instructions on how the county board is supposed to do this. I gave a heads up to Chair Weibel this evening that if for some reason this doesn't get the 12 votes necessary for approval tonight, it should be remanded to the ZBA with hopefully some direction about, say, reconsidering the waiver for the half-mile separation. Because as it turns out, the county board, or the statutes have actually made a decision that a special use permit is it's not the same kind of a decision as a map amendment, but it is a higher level decision than a variance, and you cannot simply override the recommendation of the zoning board. That being said, you should follow your conscience and vote as you see fit, but if you can't, as a board, if you can't approve this, please remand it so that we are not left with any undue risk, and we can see what the zoning board does.
Ms. Petrie.
2 questions of clarification. If it turns out that it is remanded back to the ZBA, is there still enough timeline for approval in November to make, he's shaking his head yes, so I got it. Your puppet behind you is doing that, okay. Okay, thanks. The other is, this isn't really a clarification, it is a concern of mine, and I have expressed it at ELUC, and that is, I don't have a high comfort level of determining zoning by variance. And I did ask a lot of questions at ELUC concerning the variances on these two, and they were explained well, and Aaron explained them to all of you, and they make logical sense. But once a precedent gets set of doing variances, especially connection with the solar farms, people need to start being very careful that you solve everything by variance, because that really ends up causing some precedent and difficulties down the line as the variances become aggregated, and pretty soon you lose control over what your ordinance says.
Mr. McGuire.
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you for the response. This one, and we haven't discussed the other one yet, while the one at St. Joe, obviously it will impact St. Joe somewhat, like we talked about, the Sportsman's Club does buffer it, and we're just starting with these solar panel issues, and it won't be perfect the first time. But I'm not against either one of these, as I said. And I don't know if any property will be exactly how we want it to be. So I suppose there will be variances that will always come up, and they'll bring them to us. And the next one we may not support. The issue with 1.5 miles, I'd rather see some discussion and not just be pushed back with this kind of issue associated with it. I'd like to see you guys work through it. I think you did do a lot of work with this, and you did some good work, and I'd like to see it work through properly. So hopefully people will support this. Thank you.
Further discussion. Just go with Mr. Vachaspati.
Yeah, just a quick comment. It sort of, looking at the map on my phone made me a lot more comfortable with it, so it might be nice to see sort of a map or a diagram in these reports in the future.
Well, we can certainly do that. We do include maps with the memorandum that goes to ELUC. Typically, we don't plan on a lot of discussion at the county board, but in the future, we can be better prepared for questions like this.
All right, yeah, thanks. Yeah, again, just looking at that made me a lot more comfortable. So I think this is great. I'm excited for it.
Next, newly bearded Mr. Harper.
There you go.
Yeah, last time I grew a beard, it wasn't white, guys. But anyway, as most of you know, I'm not a big solar fan person. I'm an old-time farmer. We're in prime farm ground, and I like to see it there. Why do these companies come to prime farm ground when they can build it on sand? I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, we could build these on a barge and float them up and down the Mississippi. But anyway, having received several phone calls, a lot against, having talked to the mayor of St. Joe, and she has no objection to a point on this proposed farm in front of us. And if you, like Aaron said, if you're going to build one, there's a place to do it with the Sportsman's Club there, because every Wednesday night's trap shooting. And
Did you say crap shooting?
that trap shooting. And you would not want to build near that if I was shooting, because if I was aiming at a bird in a tree, I'm going to hit the rabbit running across the field. But anyway, having personally know Chris and Aaron's family, I've struggled with this. I have major objections to the other proposed farms near St. Joe, as I received an email from the gentleman directly north of town. John and the zoning staff, the ELUC staff put hours and hours and hours into coming up with this plan, and like Aaron has said before, no plan is perfect. But the first thing in there, this company wants variances. No. We drew up a plan, you abide by our plan, or don't bother us. It's pretty simple. Chris and Aaron, I've struggled with this because, as you both know, I'm an old-time farmer. But if we're going to support one, I will support this one farm at St. Joe. The other two I cannot which haven't even come to the zoning. I think they're in the process of that now, but I'd like to see something done with the mile and a half. I know property right ownership, their value, it's a tough question. I've struggled with this. I've received calls for several months now about the Sydney one. I've been to 2 or 3 of the zoning meetings when it was pretty much a shouting match about everything going on, and the more you listened, the more you got confused. I don't know how you did it, John, but and Patsy's correct. If you start changing things, and having sat on a school board, you change something, you set a precedent. The next person up, well, you let that person do this, why can't I? And I have a problem, but I think I'm going to support this. I'll know that when I vote. Thank you.
Mr. Storr.
Yes, I'd like to second Mr. Vachasachi's comment about including maps and ortho photos with future permits. And I understand Mr. Harper is struggling with trying to deal with special circumstances, and I think you just kind of take them one at a time.
Further discussion? Okay, we're going to have a roll call vote because we do need to know the number of votes, so roll call vote, please.
Petrie.
Yes.
Rector. Rosales. Storr. Summers. Tinsley.
Yes.
Vachaspati.
Yes.
Anderson. Clemens.
Yes.
Clifford. Coert.
Yes.
Douglas.
Yes.
Eisenman.
No.
Esri.
Yes.
Furtado.
Yes.
Goss.
Yes.
Harper.
Yes.
McGuire.
Yes.
Mitchell. Patterson.
Yes.
Weibel.
Yes, motion carries 20-2, correct? Oh, 19-3? Oh, we're missing, sorry, we're missing somebody. 19-2, thank you. Mr. Esri, next item.
Yes, thank you. I move adoption of resolution number 2018-356, granting a special use permit in zoning case 897-S-18, Champaign Solar One Community Photovoltaic Solar Farm.
Second by Mr. Anderson. Mr. Hall, would you describe the location for board members who did not attend ELAC?
This is in Section 20 of Ludlow Township. It's about 2 miles northwest of the village of Rantoul and like 5 miles southwest of the village of Ludlow, so it's far outside any mile and a half.
And it's definitely a rural area, correct?
Pardon?
Definitely a rural area.
Yes.
Okay, discussion, please. Mr. McGuire.
Only one to agree with Mr. Patali. It says Champaign Solar One. Would it say Ludlow or somewhere?
Well, I think that's from Champaign County.
That's probably a name by the developer, I assume. Okay. Further discussion. Mr. Rector.
It's a mile and a half from Ludlow.
No, it's about 5 miles from Ludlow. 4 to 5 miles from Ludlow.
Mile and a half from Rantoul.
2 miles.
2 miles. Thank you.
Mr. Clifford, yes.
This is up in my area, and actually, it's a good place for a solar farm.
Thank you. Further discussion. Mr. Vachaspati? Okay. Ms. Petrie, you have a question?
Well, a comment, and that is, I'm not sure if this is the place, but I do want to make sure it's on the record that it might be worth bringing that solar ordinance or remanding it back to the ZBA to look at that mile-and-a-half issue, because it looks to me, everything that's coming before us right now is coming with variances on that distance. So it really troubles me that that's the way we're going to zone. So either we have to relook at that and get that set, because it is really poor practice. It is not best practice in zoning to zone by variance. So I would like to see that revisited.
We're talking about we're talking about the adoption of this resolution, not the ordinance tonight.
Yeah, correct.
Further discussion on this item? Seeing none, roll call.
Petrie,
Yes.
Rector, Rosales, Store, Summers, Tinsley,
Yes.
Vachusbati,
Yes.
Anderson, Clemmons, Clifford, Cowart, Douglas,
Yes.
Eisenman,
Yes.
Esri,
Yes.
Furtado,
Yes.
Goss,
Yes.
Harper,
Yes.
McGuire,
Yes.
Mitchell, Patterson,
Yes.
Weibel.
Yes, I believe we got 21-0, if I counted correctly. Okay, thank you, Mr. Esri. Let's move on to finance. Ms. Furtado.
I move the adoption of Resolution 2018-341, authorizing payment of claims.
Second by Mr. Patterson. Discussion? See none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
I move adoption of Resolution number 2018-342, authorizing purchases not following purchasing policy.
Second by Mr. Harper. Discussion? Ms. Petrie?
Just a thank you to Ms. Michaels for the new format.
Further discussion? See none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Next up is policy personnel appointments. One item, Mr. Rosales.
I move the adoption of resolution number 2018-343, appointing Kyle Schartzer to the Rural Transit Authority Group, term ending 12/31/2019.
Second by Mr. Esri. It's actually the Rural Transit Advisory.
Discussion?
I got it. Discussion of this item? See none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Rosales. We have some new business. Back to finance. Ms. Furtado.
I move the adoption of Resolution number 2018-344, authorizing budget amendment 18-00059, Fund 080 General Corporate Department 023 Recorder, increased appropriations $220,000, increased revenue $330,000.
So second, Mr. Storr. Discussion. See none, all in favor? Oh, sorry, we need a roll call.
Petrie,
Yes.
Rector, Rosales, Store, Summers, Tinsley, Vachusbati,
Yes.
Anderson, Clemmons,
Yes.
Clifford, Cowart, Douglas,
Yes.
Eisenman,
Yes.
Esri, Furtado,
Yes.
Goss,
Yes.
Harper,
Yes.
McGuire,
Yes.
Mitchell, Patterson,
Yes.
Weibel.
Yes, motion carries.
I move the adoption of Resolution number 2018-357, approving an agreement with RSM to provide post-closing accounting services for the Champaign County Nursing Home.
So second by Mr. Rosales. Ms. Busey, you want to discuss this, please? Here we go.
As you are all aware, after the closing on the sale of the nursing home, we will continue to require accounting services to be conducted to pay outstanding liabilities and to continue collection of outstanding invoices that are due to us. To that end, we asked for proposals from 3 different firms. We spoke with our legal counsel who specializes in this area, Polsinelli, and they indicated that there are very few options for this type of service because there aren't that many entities that do this type of work. They actually recommended SAK and MPA, both of whom we've worked with before. And we also were familiar with RSM, who has previously provided these types of accounting services in a contract with MPA when MPA operated the nursing home. RSM's proposal was comprehensive to our request. They are able to do the work in-house with their own staff. Their cost was the most cost-effective, or there was one other one that was very close, but from the perspective of the fact that they can do the work within their own company and that they also have a local office, we are recommending that a contract be approved with RSM for these services after the closing.
Discussion. Ms. Petrie.
I have a couple of questions. They did work with MPA, so the comfort level of their work, considering all of the financial issues that we had with MPA and were left over after MPA moved on and SAK came, what is your comfort level of them doing the job? Pretty straightforward question, I know.
It is. We talked to them about issues that had occurred while they had contracted with MPA. There were issues with the adequacy of staff at the nursing home who does a lot of this actual work upon which they were dependent to do their portion of the work that they were assigned to do by MPA. There was a limitation on hours, and there were issues with the direction. In terms of checking that out further, I spoke with Barbara Ramsey, who's the Chief Deputy Auditor, who worked directly with our RSM during that period of time. And she believed issues and problems were not necessarily directly caused by RSM. I also spoke with John Farney, who was the auditor at that time, and he pretty much concurred with that. We also had references of other counties who have nursing homes who have used RSM for similar accounting services for their nursing homes. Mr. Farney, we thought the best way of checking would be from auditor to auditor of those counties. Mr. Farney was able to obtain a very good recommendation from Rock Island County for RSM, that they were more than satisfied with the services that had been provided, that are on the same level as the services that we're asking for with this contract. He was unable to get a response from Will County, which was the other county where they had conducted similar services. So I know that there have been concerns. Quite frankly, we've heard concerns about all three of these companies. It's going to require the county maintaining a watchful eye over this as it is taken care of. But again, based on the circumstances and the issues that we've dealt with accounting at the nursing home, we believe this is the best recommendation. When I say we, I've been in, we first reviewed this with the finance chair, vice chair, and board chair, and have also worked extensively with Barb Mann in the state's attorney's office and with Van Anderson, who has worked on nothing but the nursing home since February of this year, and knows a lot about a lot of the history as well. So.
I appreciate all that explanation. That's helpful. And the watchful eyes in the county will be yours, and what, the treasurer and the auditor, or who will be doing that aspect?
Well, this is going to become an issue for a county executive in December, because we are likely.
Okay, it'll fall into that
Yeah.
time period.
So,
All right.
but we know what needs to be watched, and we will make sure that there is someone at the county who is keeping on top of this particular contract.
Okay.
It's not like keeping on top of the operation of an entire nursing home.
Right, I understand. And then my second question has to do with this request for the increased appropriation. I need a clarification.
We're not talking about that right now.
What?
We're still talking about the contract.
I know.
Well, okay, talk me into it. Go ahead, Ms. Petrie.
What's the problem?
Go, you have the floor, Ms. Petrie, go ahead.
Okay, well, there's the amount here that's being requested for this contract, but I'm a little confused due to a conversation in caucus. Do we owe this company money other than this contract that's being discussed this evening?
We owe this company this $89,000 from when they provide services to the nursing home from May of 2016 till July of, or August of 2017. And this is unpaid payments from approximately
Okay.
March of 2017 through the end of their term.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Mr. Anderson?
I just wanted to add that I appreciate SAK being in the mix for this, and I believe that they would have done a excellent job. But I am also a firm believer that we probably shouldn't always use the same accounting services as we go through transitions, that sometimes we need that break. And with the county providing the watchful eyes, if you will, I feel comfortable with this proposal as it is.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
I move the adoption of resolution number 2018-358, authorizing the budget amendment 18-00058, Fund 080, General Corporate Department 075, General County, increased appropriations 89,950, increased revenue none from fund balance, and I'm going to go ahead and read the explanation. Reason to pay outstanding obligation of accounting services owed by the nursing home to RSM, payment to be made on date of closing of the sale of the nursing home.
So moved.
Second by Matthew, be a second, Mr. McGuire. Discussion. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Petrie? Yes. Rector? Yes. Rosales?
Yes.
Storr? Yes. Summers? Yes. Tinsley?
Yes.
Vatraspaddy?
Yes.
Anderson? Yes. Clemens?
Yes.
Clifford? Yes. Cowart? Douglas?
Yes.
Eisenman?
Yes.
Esri?
Yes.
Furtado? Goss?
Yes.
Harper?
Yes.
McGuire?
Yes.
Mitchell? Patterson?
Yes.
Weibel?
Yes, motion carries.
There is a nursing home cash flow report from September for information only in your packet.
Thank you. We have one more item on other business. I ask Mr. Furtado to get this motion on the floor.
I move a request for an extension to file Champaign County Circuit Clerk's audit report for the year ending December 31st, 2017 with the Administrative Office of the Illinois Courts.
Is there a second? Second by Mr. Rosales. Ms. Busey, do you want to comment on this? This is,
No.
okay, all right. This seems to happen every year. I suggest we vote on it. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Seeing there's no other business, we're in recess.